Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we will review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi, Masechet Eruvin, pages 21 through 27. Chaf Aleph, 21. Rav tells us the following. Lo pasei beiraot b'chutz la'aretz, that the leniency of well enclosures, using L-shaped boards to enclose an area of the public domain and make it a private domain for the purpose of accessing drinking water, this leniency does not apply in chutz la'aretz. Typically, chutz la'aretz means everywhere in the world outside of Eretz Yisrael. But in this particular context, the words chutz la'aretz actually mean outside of Israel or Babylonia, that the two are lumped together to have the same law. Why should this be the case? So the Gemara explains, because outside of the so-called Aretz, there are no yeshivot, there are no places of Torah study. In Babylonia and Israel, we know certainly there were such places of Torah study. As Rashi explains, mitivata, lihiyot tamidim holchim le'ir le'ir, students would go from city to city, lilmod Torah, to study the Torah, upasei berot, and as for the well enclosures, lohutru, they were not permitted ela lo'olei regalim, except for those going on pilgrimage festivals to Yerushalayim. But also for similar related purposes, that they're going for a mitzvah purpose. So just as going to Jerusalem to celebrate Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot is a mitzvah and thus allows for the leniency of pasei beiraot, so too going to study Torah in the yeshiva will allow for such a leniency, and such places of learning only existed in Israel and Babylonia. 22. Chavbet. Lo ya'acher lesono. The Torah says that God will not delay in punishing those that hate him. He will not delay those who hate him, but he will delay in providing the either punishment or reward to those who are fully righteous. What is the meaning of that which I command you today to do? Today, in this world, in the Olam Hazeh, we are to do the mitzvot, but the mitzvot are not given for us to do in the hereafter, in the Olam Haba. We do not do mitzvot then. Hayom la'asotam, today, in this world, Olam Hazeh, we do the mitzvot, and in the future, in the hereafter, in the Olam Haba, that is where we will receive our heavenly reward. 23. The Mishnah says the following. Amar Rabbi Eli. Rabbi Eli says, Shamati mi Rabbi Eliezer, I heard in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, Anshei Chatzer sheshachach edam echad mehem eruv beito asur milachnis umlahotzi aval lahem mutar. If one person in a courtyard forgot to participate in the eruv, then it is permissible for the other people to carry from their homes into the common area of the courtyard of the Chatzer and even into this other fellow's home. But he himself is not permitted to do so. Now, it will only be permitted if on the next day, on Shabbat proper, he was mevatel reshut. He nullified, he negated his rights to the common area. At that point, everyone else would be allowed to carry, but he would not. If he is not mevatel reshut, then nobody would be allowed to carry because there would not have been an effective eruv chatzerot. 24. Karpef shelohu kaf ledira. If you have an area which was not enclosed for the purpose of residential use, but nonetheless was enclosed, Yorotemi Beit Sa'atayim, and it is greater than the size of 2 Beit Sa'ah, then what can you do if you want to allow carrying in that area? Because up until this point, it is forbidden to carry in such a karpef. Kate said huoseh. So Rashi explains, Achar kein bana etzlo dira. There was a house built in that karpef long after it had been enclosed. So what can I do now for the person living in that karpef who would like to have the ability to carry, but simply doesn't because of the prior enclosure? The answer is, break part of the fence for a gap greater than 10 amot in length, and then close up part of that gap so that it is no longer the size of 10 amot or more, but rather is less than 10 amot. And lo and behold, this area has now been newly enclosed for the purpose of the benefit of habitation there, the person who lives there, the dira. 25. Achsadra b'dika. What happens if you have a canopy that is supported by beams, but has no side walls, and it's in an open area, it's in a field. Rav Amar Mutal Kula. Rav said you're allowed to carry in the entire area under the canopy. Ushmul Amar Badal Ramot. And Shmuel says, no, you cannot carry in the entirety of the canopy, but rather only in your 4 amot, your 4 cubit squared space where you are located. Rav says you're allowed to carry in the whole thing. Why? Amrinan, we will assert the following halachic dictum, that the edges of the roof will extend downward and create fictional partitions on all the sides. So now, because the roof is extending downward, it is though the entire thing is enclosed in a building, not an open air space. Whereas Shmuel says, we will not assert the halachic notion of pitikra, and so all you have is a roof and you don't have side walls, and in the absence of side walls, this is not an enclosure, and thus you could not carry anything more than the 4 cubits. Mishnah 26. You're allowed to use food for the creation of the Eruv Chatzerot, or for that matter, Eruv Techumin, that might not be permitted for consumption for the person making that particular Eruv. Meaning, examples include, a Nazir could use wine for his Eruv. The Nazir is not allowed to drink wine. He took a solemn oath that he would not drink wine. And for that matter, Yisrael, a regular Jew, a non-Kohen, could make use of Truma, even though he's not allowed to eat Truma. Only a Kohen could eat Truma. So Rashi explains, why is this good enough? Even though the person using this foodstuff as an Eruv cannot lawfully eat from it, since it is food, and other people are allowed to eat it, so it is food, someone else could eat it, therefore, even for this person, it can be used for the purposes of the Eruv. Chaf Zayin, 27. Afanan nami tenina, b'kol ma'arvin, you're allowed to use all kinds of foodstuffs to make your Eruv. Chutz min hamayim min hamelech, except for water and salt. Okay? Why? Because they don't provide sustenance. Vayika kamen v'pitriyot, but wait a second, what about truffles and mushrooms? Those also do not provide much sustenance, and why did the Mishnah not list those as excluded items with which you cannot make your Eruv? We learn from here you're not allowed to derive an absolute law from the statement of a klal, a general principle in the Mishnah, even where it says except for, in the sense that the Mishnah said all foods are kosher, are suitable for use as an Eruv, except for water and salt. Well, there are other exceptions. So we see that even when a Mishnah says except for, that doesn't mean those include every last exception. There might in fact be other exceptions.